On May 1st, 1995, skeletal remains were found in a cornfield near Thomasboro, Illinois. This case was determined to be a homicide, but investigators had a big question. Who did these remains belong to? It would take 25 years and extensive DNA testing before authorities would know the identity of Jane Doe. Hi guys, welcome back to Murder in the Midwest. I'm Brooke. If this is your first time on my channel, I discuss unsolved homicides that have occurred in small towns in the Midwest. Today's case is especially notable for me because it has ties to my hometown. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, if you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button below. There's also a bell icon. Please hit that. That will give you notification of when I upload new videos, which is every Wednesday. I also have an Instagram that you can follow, Murder in the Midwest, as well as Twitter, which is just Murder Midwest. Okay, so let's dive into today's case. This is really interesting because it's, to me, a two-part mystery. One, we have to identify the remains of Jane Doe that was found in this farm field. And then two, we need to figure out who actually killed Jane Doe. So let's go back to that day on May 1st, 1995, when Jane Doe's remains were discovered. So we have a worker that's spraying for weeds near a farm field in Thomasboro, Illinois, which is in Champaign County. So it's kind of central Illinois. And he discovers bones. He sees bones in this ditch. So immediately calls authorities. They do an extensive search of this field and they find basically an entire female skeleton, as well as a couple of clothing items and a couple of jewelry items. So they take these bones, they send them to the coroner. The coroner ruled this case a homicide, and she didn't give a 100% cause of death. She said it could either be from multiple gunshot wounds or bludgeoned to death, which are two very different and distinct ways of dying, but we knew that it was a homicide. So now authorities are tasked with having to find out who did these remains belong to. So they started first with a forensic anthropologist who studied the bones, and these are some things that they knew about these bones from the beginning. One, they knew that they were female, and they knew that they belonged to either a Caucasian or a Hispanic woman. They were looking for somebody between the ages of 16 to 29, and she was either between the heights of 5'1" to 5'9". They also were looking for somebody with brown, straight hair, and they thought it might have a reddish tint to it. They also believed that this female had at one point given birth. So now we have a bit of a composite of who we think that this female, this Jane Doe, could have been. So now authorities do something called a clay configuration. So you might have seen this done before, where an artist actually puts clay onto a skull and they try to figure out what this person looked like. I will actually show a picture of what they came up with. It is a little frightening. It doesn't to me look like anybody. And I think even if a friend or family member would have recognized Jane Doe, they would have had a hard time knowing for sure who it was. But at least it was a start. They also released pictures of the article of clothing that were found with the body. So I will put up a picture of some of the items that were found with Jane Doe's remains. So one of them was a white V-collared short sleeve blouse in a size medium, which had buttons down the center of the front and back. There was a pocket on the left side of the shirt and the label read Huntington Ridge. Nearby, there was also a pair of sweatpants. They also had two rings that were found with the remains. The first ring was a gold-colored plain wedding band. The second ring was gold-colored with a large green stone in the center, surrounded by smaller empty circles which appeared to be missing small individual stones. Authorities also estimated that these bones could have been in the field for up to 11 months before being discovered. So what they did first is obviously take a look at any missing persons in the area who these bones could be a match to. So they started from there. They also had artist composite sketch released based upon what they thought this person's facial features would have looked like. They're releasing those details. but they aren't getting very far. This case was also featured on America's Most Wanted, as well as the National Missing and Unidentified Persons website. In 2009, Jane Doe's details were entered into a website called NamUs, and almost 300 missing women were excluded from the search for her, with about 80 shown publicly on the rule out list. Multiple sketches of her were done over the years, with the latest being released in 2019, but they really hit a wall. They weren't having any success in identifying who these remains belonged to until May of 2019. So producers from a TV show called The Unknown Doe Project reached out to authorities and said, we want to pay for any further DNA extractions and DNA testing on these remains so we can figure out who they belong to. So the producer of that show, her name is Yolanda McCleary. She actually gave an interview to a news station that I'll link below. And she said that nobody should die without a name. She was bound and determined to figure out who these remains belong to. Side note here, if anybody has any information on this TV show called The Unknown Doe Project, please comment below. I have Googled, I have looked on IMDb. I think it sounds like a fascinating series, but I can find no information about it. I would love to watch it when it finally comes out. So if you do know more about it, like I said, please leave a comment below. So authorities partner with Yolanda and they start to do DNA testing. And basically, I'm going to make this way more simple than what it is, but they put these samples into a genetic testing website, and they had thousands of hits initially. And then they just kept narrowing everything down to the point where they knew they had several family trees that were intersecting, and the last name that kept coming up was Wyant. So they knew that this Jane Doe probably had family in the Western Illinois area, and the last name was Wyant. So after several months of testing and being able to narrow down that Jane Doe's family tree had the last name of Wyant, producers worked with authorities in Stark County, Illinois. They introduced them to the parents of a young woman who had been missing for quite some time. Her name was Keri Wyant. Keri Lynn parents are both still alive, and they provided DNA samples, and through the samples they provided, authorities were able to positively identify that these remains did belong to their daughter, Keri Lynn Wyant. Now I know what you're thinking. If Keri Lynn had been missing for years and years, wouldn't she have been on a missing persons registry? Wouldn't authorities have found that and be able to link those remains to her and have discovered her identity a lot sooner? Well, you would think that. However, this is a little twist in this story. Keri Wyant was never actually reported missing. So now let's go back and focus on the second part of this mystery, which is who was Keri Lynn and what happened to her in her final days. We know that Keri Wyant was born October 18th, 1971 in Galesburg, Illinois. Her family lived in a little village called Lafayette, Illinois. When I say little, I mean tiny, tiny, less than 200 people. And I know that initially Keri attended grade school in Toulon, Illinois, and she was there from about kindergarten to, I would say, 6th grade. I don't have a definitive answer on if she was there past 6th grade, because sometime in 1985, when Keri was around 14 years old, she left her parents' home. Why she left her parents' home has been debated on social media with people sharing her story, and the answer that keeps coming up is, I'll just say this, it doesn't sound like she had a very good home life. Now, I have heard more specific details of what was going on, but because I cannot confirm those, I don't want to say exactly. But if what I've heard is true, I don't blame Keri for wanting to leave home. So the years between when she left home in 1985 until 1989 are a little sketchy. We don't know exactly where she was at. Authorities have reported that she may have lived with some relatives. They even said that she may have been in what sounds like a homeless shelter in Peoria. But Keri's timeline picks up back again in 1989. So remember when I said that this story had ties to my hometown? Well, this is where this comes into play. So Keri went to high school in Galva, Illinois. She attended Galva High School in 1989 and 1990. I was born and raised in Galva. My brother happened to graduate class of 1989. So when this story broke just this past week that these remains had been identified as Keri, I actually texted him and asked him if he remembered her. And he said, yeah, he had no idea that she had technically been missing all these years, but he did remember her. She was a couple years younger than him. And it's just crazy how the story has evolved and taken on a life of its own on Facebook, with everybody from Galva, Illinois area sharing her story. So she attended high school in 1989 and 1990. The pictures I'm putting up of her right now are actually her yearbook photos from those years. And while she didn't graduate from Galva, she did stay in the area and she worked at a few restaurants. So authorities have actually pieced together a timeline of Keri's life for the next few years. I'm gonna put that on screen right now and just kind of go through where she had been working. As you can see from the timeline on the screen, in 1990, she worked for a couple different restaurants in Galva, Illinois. Then she also worked for a Hardee's, which is a fast food chain in Galesburg, Illinois. Galesburg's only about 30 minutes from Galva. From there, she came back to Galva. She worked at the Taco House on Center Avenue from 1990 to 1991. In 1991, it also looked like she worked for a couple in Abington, Illinois. And then she also worked for a Wendy's restaurant that was owned by Parco Limited, which was a franchise company of Wendy's. In 1992, she worked for a company owned by Springwood Associates that was based in New York, but Keri worked locally in Illinois. In 1993, she worked for a Dunkin' Donuts in Peoria, Illinois, and this Dunkin' Donuts was located on Knoxville Avenue, and it was owned by Bilco Enterprises. In 1993, she continued to work in Peoria at a restaurant on Richards Boulevard that was called BJ's or BJ's Restaurant. And then for some reason, she went all the way up to Fena, Texas. She was there for a very short time, and she worked at a gas station called the 110 Gas Station and Restaurant, or I-10 Gas Station and Restaurant, for a short time. And then that's when she resurfaces. So early winter 1994, Keri makes her way back to Illinois. And I believe at first she was in Galesburg. She was pregnant and had nowhere to stay. So she ended up moving in with a friend in Kewanee, Illinois. Now Kewanee is right by Galva. It's like 10-15 minutes away, so really, really close by. And in May of 1994, Keri gave birth to a baby boy. Now, this is where Keri's timeline gets a little sketchy because we don't know exactly where she was after that. And that's where authorities need the public's help in determining if you knew Keri, if you worked with Keri, just trying to determine exactly where she was and exactly when she was killed. So we know that late May 1994 is when she gave birth to her son. Sometime after that, she left her son with her friend that she was staying with in Kewanee. I am unsure if she left her son and said, hey, I'm gonna join this traveling amusement company that puts on carnivals. I'm gonna work for the summer, but she always had the intention of coming back. Or if it was a case of she wanted her friend to adopt her son, so she relinquished her parental rights. I'm unsure of that, but we do know that she left her son with this friend and she worked for an amusement company that I'm probably not gonna pronounce correctly. It is called Seaware Amusements, and they are based out of New Athens, Illinois. So if you're unfamiliar, because I guess I took for granted that everybody has fairs and carnivals in the summertime, but I have seen people comment on different Reddit threads about this case, and they're like, what? So in the Midwest, it's really popular for the months of June, July, and August for different counties to have county fairs. State fairs are really popular as well. And these different carnival and amusement companies will come in, set up temporary rides for the kids to ride, set up food trucks, games, that sort of thing. So that was the type of company that Keri was working for. Authorities know that she worked the Henry County Fair, which took place in late June 1994 in Cambridge, Illinois. So again, Cambridge, not that far from Galva. I'll put up on a map so you can see the distance between them. She worked the Henry County Fair. They're not sure if she went on to work other fairs, but they have a theory because of where her body was found. This amusement company had a contract to do the Fisher Community Fair in Fisher, Illinois. And that always takes place the weekend after the 4th of July, so mid-July. Fisher, Illinois is only about 14 miles from Thomasboro, Illinois, which is where Keri's remains were found. So it would make sense that after the Henry County Fair, she went and worked this Fisher Community Fair, and then something happened. but they don't definitively know if she works that fair or not, because that amusement company does not keep employee records back that far. So that's where they need the public's help. If you worked that fair, if you knew somebody that did in the mid-90s, I'm gonna put up the number below that you can call and talk to the detectives on this case, because like I said, they're trying to piece together a timeline of when Keri was actually killed, because we don't know for sure. So that's when kind of the trail on Keri goes cold. And after the Henry County Fair that was in late June 94, we don't know what happened to Keri until her remains were found May 1st, 1995. Now, authorities have said they thought that her bones could have been in that field for up to 11 months before being found, which I find a little odd, because if they were left in a cornfield, wouldn't they have been found when the farmer went to harvest everything that fall? I don't know. Maybe they were overlooked. Maybe they were placed there, you know, maybe she was killed prior to that, but they were placed there after. Authorities have never said that they believe she was actually killed in that field. So for me, I feel like cornfields are a really easy place to dump bodies. I actually talked about another case involving a woman from Bloomington named Haley Eichhorn. I'll link that story below, but that's a case of where she was killed elsewhere, but her body was found in a cornfield. So it is a popular, unfortunately, dumping destination for dead bodies, because you can do so discreetly in the middle of the night. You're in the middle of nowhere. You can dump remains and go. So of course, like I said, now authorities are trying to figure out when exactly Keri died, how she was killed. I'm still a little puzzled that the coroner is saying that she was either shot multiple times or bludgeoned, because those are two very distinctive and different ways to die. So I don't know if authorities are just keeping mum on that, you know, to maintain the investigation, or if they truly don't know. But either way, we know it's a homicide. Now, in a sad twist of fate, unfortunately, the son that Keri had ended up dying when he was only 7 years old. So her son died October 30th, 2001, when he was 7 years old. He was unfortunately riding a bicycle in Kewanee, Illinois. He was struck by a vehicle and he subsequently died of his injuries. This is where people have a lot of questions around what exactly were the conditions of her friend raising her child, and why didn't anybody report Keri missing? I'm really trying to withhold judgment on that, because I don't know the specifics of her family dynamic or her life. But I know when I hear that remains have been identified and they haven't been, you know, it wasn't somebody that anybody had reported missing, my first thought is usually, oh my gosh, they had no friends, they had no family. But that isn't the case with Keri. You know, she had parents that were living. She has, to my knowledge, at least 4 siblings. She has aunts, uncles, and cousins around the area as well. And then obviously she had a friend that was taking care of her child for her. I'm just really puzzled as to why nobody reported her missing. If you know more about this, please leave me a comment below. I would love to know just the circumstances around that. Or if perhaps maybe somebody did try to report her missing and authorities didn't take it seriously, let me know. That could definitely be the case, and it just hasn't been reported yet. Like I said, trying to keep an open mind about it and really just getting details out there about Keri, so that those of you watching this video may be able to help authorities piece together a timeline and figure out what exactly happened to her. Hi guys, thank you so much for watching. Please give a thumbs up if you like what you saw. Again, remember, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. I do post new videos every Wednesday. And once again, follow me on Instagram or Twitter. On Instagram, I am Murder in the Midwest. On Twitter, I am Murder Midwest. See you next time, guys.